Learn to be super successful. Subscribe to my channel, Meathead.
You're not emotionally ready to cope with it. And we haven't had any failures up here tell you this. We've only had successful people. The failures either don't accept it or have accepted it on a lesser level, or I don't know, because they quit. It's like talk's cheap. It takes money to buy whiskey. And a lot of people can see errors in others, but they don't know that they're standing in the same pile of shit. And when you get out there and when you leave the gate and you're on your own, this is what I fear I create, and that's easy to say, but it's hard to accept. And while you're still fired up, more or less, hot and bothered, and I've relighted or rekindled the fire in your belly, and all those kind of cheap cliches. They're nothing but cheap cliches, because when you get out there, and it's a lonely motherfucker. And even though my favorite saying is default's a bitch, but I can add to that, default's a bitch, it's a lonely motherfucker, it's lonely at the top. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of other cheap cliches that you could use to describe the environment. But where there's smoke, there's fire, and it is lonely out there. And when you follow the steps and adhere to the steps very carefully, as the SEAL guys say, the only easy day was yesterday. And every day is a motherfucker. And to the extent that I did, and it's memorialized by numbers, 10 years almost to the day that I was able to maintain the focus. I don't often wonder so much now, 15, 20 years ago, how come I didn't last 10 years? I would have thought that would, and we're going to talk about goals this morning, I would have thought, 10 years, and but I didn't think about it at the time, because I was so fucking brutalized, scarred. And you heard me say, the human body's got about 3 million pores in it, more or less, and I've been fucked in every goddamn one at least twice. At least twice. And as they would say, Winnicott says, not in a good way. 3 million fuck sounds pretty good, but about 99% of them weren't in a good way. But I was keeping my head down, and I very rarely looked up other than to my goals. And when we talk about the goal sequence, in 1983-ish, the spring of 83, and I'm running down Torrance Boulevard towards Disneyland onto the 101, and I used to run 20 miles Saturday or Sunday. I don't know if you call it unwind, whatever it was. But I used to run to Disneyland, have lunch, and run back. And I went through a number of young guys, a lot younger than I was, as running partners. And once a quarter, I'd run 40 miles on a Sunday or Saturday. But in hindsight, that was like me getting my six-pack. A waste of fucking time. And I deluded myself. At the time, I was not chilling, but it was my form of relaxation. And towards the end, I had the headphones with me in the headphones. Those big, ugly headphones you used to wear. Well, maybe you don't remember, but anyway. So I'm running down Torrance Boulevard, and I had just seen the Robb Report, which is only out a couple of years, which I recommend that you subscribe to the Robb Report. And they had on the back page the special shit for sale. And that special shit for sale, there was 4 or 5 castles on islands. Like in the James Bond, when they show a castle on an island. Of course, that castle is really ruined now, but for the movies, they make it into like it's still there. And I decided I was going to get how could I better approach my methodology, which I didn't call QLA at the time, and it was for me to get away from my family. And so the spring, that was my goal. And Thanksgiving of that year, I went to Britain, came here to look for castles. Because for whatever reason, I couldn't get there before springtime, so I waited for Thanksgiving. And I looked at, this was the 19th estate I looked at. Now, but I pulled the trigger. And everybody knows we got one moving part, a motivated seller, and we got to pull the trigger. Those are the kind of the two of the legs of our stool. But if you don't pull the fucking trigger on the motivated seller, you might as well have not found him. And there's a lot of deep-seated stuff that you're wired for, some of which you can't unwire. Some of you'll think it's impolite, and all of it. And when we talk about closing this afternoon, tomorrow, you're gonna be shocked that But in one form or another, so far, all the people that you've listened to have found their way to pull the trigger. They found their way to give an embarrassing offer. They found their way. But it wasn't, as they say here, easy. And as Peter said, he could have done it in 2 years instead of 4. As Andrea said, he waited 5 fucking years. That makes him sick. Considering what he's done in 3. But you got to pull the fucking trigger. And I admit, it's been easy for me to pull the trigger. It's beyond easy. Because I don't care what anybody thinks. You can't hurt my feelings. I engage in self-deprecation. It's easy to poke fun at myself. And there's not too many of me. Although I used to say, how come everybody can't be like me, to my mother? She said, thank God they're not. And my first wife, why can't everybody be like me? Thank God they're not. You can ask Sally tonight, decades ago, why can't everybody be like me? Thank God they're not. But you got to pull the fucking trigger. I told you about the world-class salesman that looked at the phone for 40, 45 minutes. And his wife finally says, shit, I'm going to call Dan. Then he jumped on the phone, okay? But you got to be willing to pull the trigger. Not willing, you got to be wanting to pull the trigger. And I said that if you can't at least visualize yourself on that backward fucking bike, I'm not saying you're ever going to ride the bike backwards, but you got to think that you're going to ride the bike backwards. You got to know you're going to ride the bike backwards, no matter how many times you fall off. Most of you, when you had bikes, a little kid, had training wheels, on the back of the bike. It was a 2-wheel bike, but it had little training wheels to support you so you didn't fall off on your melon head. And then when they took the training wheels off, what happened? You fell over on your melon head. And then either a big brother or sister or a mother came in, oh, poor baby, poor baby. You should have never had training wheels. And if you had training wheels and you fell over on your melon head, they should have just allowed you to keep falling over on your melon head. The majority of the people on the planet, even the poor people, they only have one bike in the village. The older kids are helping him ride. They didn't have training wheels until he could ride. In caveman day, that's, when you were 6 or 8 or whatever, you went out on the hunt and you were supposed to kill something. Well, that's a far fucking cry from the majority of the world now. But you got to pull the trigger. I think I might have said, I've said this on YouTube a bunch of times, I had a propensity to jump out in the street on oncoming traffic when I was little. And my dad he couldn't beat it out of me, and so he decided, we had an old Willys car, which was kind of a throwback to a Jeep from World War II. And he said, well, if I hit him with the car and simulate, he'll learn not to jump out in the street. Well, old Willie's cars used to have these runner boards that you could actually stand on, you know. And there was a piece of chrome. In those days, they had real chrome on cars that was sticking out. And make a long story short, hit me with a car, and the chrome went through my leg. And he's dragging me on the street. And my mother's over on the side, screaming and yelling, Manny, Manny, Danny's connected to the second gear. So that's, when we had dogs that used to jump on people, my dad would run over them, teach them not to jump on people. And that's how I was raised. Our first 3 dogs that disappeared jumped in the bassinet too many times. And as I got older, when the dogs disappeared, he used to say, I gave it away to a farmer. There's no farms in the hood. I know for a fact he drowned a Labrador we had in a bathtub. So it's been easy for me to pull the trigger for self-defense. For most people, it's not. And now we got people in the military who won't pick up a motherfucking gun. I'm telling you this because this stuff is what you create in your own mind. Your heart's not going to stop when somebody hangs up on you. You'll feel like it's going to stop the first few times, but your system doesn't shut down through rejection. And the reason why we build up these anxieties, I can't make you perspire. Only you can make you perspire. And when we talk later today, and when you go into these meetings, always dry your hands like this. 50% of the people that I've met one-on-one so far, that I've shook hands with, their hands are wet. I'm just sitting in a little calm, serene, more or less, environment in my office. For those of you that have been there, before you leave, all of you will have sat in the office. And that's why I say practice. Practice. Practice drying your hands so you don't forget. Some of you say, well, my hands don't get wet. Well, you ought to be shaking my hand, and I can tell you. And if they don't get wet, they start to get cold because the blood is not circulating in them. And that's all nerves. That's all nerves. And when you're meeting people out there in the real world, because this is a cloistered environment, as hard as it may seem to you at times, this is a cloistered environment. Because I know when I'm pushing the buttons, your anxious buttons, I'm pushing the ones that I know will help you learn so you don't do it again. When you get out there, they're not pushing the buttons to help you learn. And they're pushing the buttons to hurt your feelings, make you feel an idiot or whatever. It's a different environment. You'll wish that you're back in the cloistered environment. But all this is overcome, not totally, but partially overcome by practice. Perfect practice, not, And I tell you, first tape yourself and then film yourself, and you'll be just shocked beyond belief how shitty you sound and how even more shitty you look. And when you practice, you put your uniform on. You don't sit there in your boxer shorts or your panties and your brassiere in front of a mirror. You put on the uniform. Remember, your subconscious doesn't know you're full of shit. Last night you saw Steve, alpha male, one of the few alpha male high-performance guys out there, speaking at Oxford, where I spoke of myself. He didn't say any bad words. At the beginning of the talk, if I remember correctly, he said he was nervous because he knew this. He was nervous because this was going to be on YouTube forever. Okay. The good news is we have YouTube. The bad news is we have YouTube because they can pull up, the idiotic things you say, which I've said a number of them, and more importantly, how idiotic you can look. What are the takeaways from Steve? Yes, sir.
Encouraging
Just like this group. I knew you'd feel, like you were back home. Go ahead.
Well, you can see that he knows what he
Throws you out. We don't do it now, but we had a section on litigation as a business tool, and all the lawsuits he was involved in, Microsoft, threatening people, hitting people, threatening the CEO of AT&T bodily. I buried him before. I'm going to fuck him where he breathes again. And they're reading this in court, And this is how, unlike you mealy-mouthed cunts, this is how they talk. And if they don't talk, because of iPhones now, they all think the same. How do you get rid of your competition? You kill them. Not physically. You buy market share. Big companies buy market share by undercutting yours, even if they lose money. That's how they buy market share. They're killing you financially. They're putting people out of work. They're keeping people from paying their mortgage payment. And you're trying to work out a win-win situation. What are you smoking? What else about Steve? Yes, sir. That's an understatement. Yeah, go ahead. Steve Ballmer doesn't know anything about computers. He knows nothing about software, hardware. He doesn't do spreadsheets like you guys. World's greatest tennis player can't play tennis. Ballmer, in charge of sales and marketing for one of the leading computer, software, hardware, whatever kind of company they are. And there's you reading the, Steve Jobs didn't know shit. And then there's you reading the manuals to try to figure out the shit. And that's because you're afraid of making a mistake, because you're afraid of what people are going to think. You're afraid of what people are going to say about you.